Hello and welcome to this explanatory video for the board game FisherFolk. FisherFolk is for 2 to 4 players. It is a very light Euro game. It lasts around 30 minutes per player for an experienced player, slightly longer the first time you play it. During this video I will take you through a single turn of the game, highlighting each phase as we go and hopefully highlighting the 3 key concepts of the game. Those 3 key concepts to bear in mind are that play always runs from poorest to richest player, that as soon as an item is sold in a marketplace, the price immediately drops, and that you can only use a zone on the island if you have the most meeples in it. Okay, moving forward, what is the aim of the game? The aim of the game is to be the first player to make $100. Okay, we have a wealth tracker running right around the board. The first player to get to 100 wins. Failing that, okay, when we get to turn 10 on this turn tracker, whichever player has the most money at that point will win the game. Okay, so to take you through the first phase of the game. The first phase is set the board. So at the start of every turn, we've got a little bit of admin we need to do on the board. Set the board comprises of moving the turn marker along 1 space, to say that we've moved along 1 turn. Moving the price of every item in every market up by 1 space. So everything becomes slightly more valuable. The price to sell it gets slightly higher. Adding lobsters to the board. So these are lobster tokens. And we go around every lobster pot that's on the board and add a lobster token to it. Okay? So there's only a couple on the board at the moment. Once it has 4 lobster tokens on, it's full. So only up to a maximum of 4. And then finally, we add fish to the board. We've got this lovely cloth fish bag, which allows us to add the fish at random. We're going to add a fish to every space unless it has a boat in it or a boat next to it, i.e. to the left and right of it. So this space gets a fish. This space gets a fish. This space does. This space does. This space does. This space would not get a fish because, as you can see, it has a space with a boat next to it. This space would not get a fish because, as you can see, it's got a boat in. And this one wouldn't get a fish because it's next to a boat. We do that for every space on the board, and then that is the set the board phase. As you can see, it only takes a few seconds. So you can see the board is divided into various areas, and by far the largest area is the ocean. So the next phase is the boat phase. Allow me to show you a close-up of a boat card so you can see what the boats can do. Each boat card has several pieces of information on it. The cost of the boat when you buy it, we'll come to that in a moment. The boat number, which corresponds to a number printed on the actual boat meeple. These 3 arrows, which let you know that each boat is capable of performing 3 actions in a turn. 2 fish slots, so this boat can carry 2 fish. 1 lobster pot slot, so it can carry 1 lobster pot, and 3 upgrade slots, so it can have 3 upgrade cards assigned to it, all of which will become relevant in the next phase. So during the boat phase, play always runs from poorest to richest, and as we can see here, red currently has 16 in the bank, whereas yellow is all the way up here at 38, so red is going to go first. We know from our boat card that each boat can perform 3 actions, okay? And the actions they can choose from are move, simply move a boat from 1 space to an adjacent space. That's 1 action. Fish, which is to take all the fish currently in the same space as you and place it onto your boat on the slots. Now this is boat number 2, so this corresponds to boat number 2 here, so we can put these 2 fish here. That's 1 action. If there were more fish in that space, we'd have to choose only 2 of them because there's only 2 slots on the boat currently. The next action is to drop lobster pots. That is where you take a lobster pot from a slot on your boat and you place it into a vacant one of these spaces, one of these little buoy spaces. And the final action is to retrieve lobster pots, which is where you take a lobster pot that's already on a space, one of your lobster pots, you pick it up and you put it on the corresponding boat onto a vacant lobster spot. Okay, so that's your 4 actions you can do in the boat phase. So running from poorest to richest, each player gets to do 3 things with their boat initially, and the menu they have to choose from is Move, fish, drop lobster pots, retrieve lobster pots. Okay, moving on to the final phase of the turn, and by far the most interesting, is the meeple phase. You can see we have these various zones the meeples can go in. We've got this main island, we've got a couple of ferries, and we've got this little warehouse island here. Okay. During the meeple phase, and this is again a core concept, if you have the most meeples in an area, you're allowed to activate it. Well, how does that work? Well, first of all, let's see who's poorest. Okay, red is poorest, so red's going to go first. Red is now allowed to move all of their meeples. Once they finish moving all of their meeples, they're allowed to activate all their meeples. So, where can they move their meeples to? Well, let's go through the island zones one by one. If you have the most meeples in the town centre, you can recruit new meeples. How do you do that? Well, you find a meeple, you see the number on it. In this case, this one costs 5. You pay 5, and then you get to add the meeple to the board. Each colour is allowed up to 6 meeples. The first 2 you start the game with, they're free. The next 2 cost 5 each, then 10, then 15. So if you have the most meeples in the town centre, you can recruit new meeples. If you have the most meeples in the boatyard, you can buy new boats. How do you do that? Well, you take the boat card of your colour that's remaining, you pay the cost on it. Okay, you find that boat meeple and you place it docked there. Then you have a new boat. Each player has 4 boats available to them. They start with 1, the next boat costs $5, then 10, then 15. This here is the dry dock. Sorry, this is the dry dock. If you have the most meeples in the dry dock, you're allowed to buy upgrade cards. How does that work? Well, you have 4 available at any one time to buy. They each got a cost on. You pay the cost, record that on the wealth tracker, and then you assign the upgrade card to the boat. Let's look at an example of that. Here we have a boat with no upgrades on. What could we do? Well, we could have bought this upgrade for $6, which we can clearly see has 2 extra fish slots on. So that will mean when this boat fishes, it can catch up to 4 fish. We could have bought an upgrade like this one here. Once per turn, drop lobster pots without using an action. That makes this boat slightly more efficient at catching lobsters because it's only got 3 actions, but it can do this for free. So that wouldn't count towards its 3 actions. And we have upgrades that allow boats to interact with markets in different ways, upgrades that give them more actions, upgrades that give them more lobsters, more fish. There's actually 36 unique upgrades in the game, and the way you combine those on your boat really allows you to tailor your boat to different specialities and your play style. And so the game very quickly becomes asymmetric in that sense. Although you all start the same, as soon as you start getting upgrades, the boats become very different. So the next zones you'll see on the island is there is a blue market, a green market, and a red market. Now, if you have the most meeples in one of those markets, you are allowed to sell products in that market. Let's take the red market as an example here. I have the most meeples in the red market. Let's say red boat number 2 is docked. And you can see that currently in the red market, we can sell brown fish or tan fish. Brown fish currently sell for 2, tan fish sell for 4 each. Oh look, boat number 2 actually has 2 brown fish on it. So we're allowed to sell them. How do we do that? We remove them from the boat. We put them back in the fish. And what was the cost? So we sold 2 of them at 2 each. So we gain 4 wealth. Now, this is another one of the core concepts. As soon as that is sold, this must drop immediately to the lowest price. Not such a big deal here, but if we just sold tan fish, it would have dropped from 4 down to 1, meaning any other players that were coming into market with tan fish would be quite annoyed that their tan fish aren't worth as much. But not to worry, because you can also sell tan fish in the blue market. So the blue market sells grey and tan. The green market sells brown and red, and the red market sells brown and tan. So you have options. You'll also notice on the marketplaces you have these little slots for meeples. If you were to place a meeple in there on your turn, any time you have that meeple there, any player makes a sale of the corresponding fish type in that market, you get 1 gold. So if another player came in and sold 3 tan fish, you'd immediately get 3 gold. And you can have up to 2 meeples in each row. So in this case, if they sold 3, you'd immediately get 6 gold. This is great because it allows you to benefit from other players' actions. It makes other players consider where they want to sell, whether they want you to make that money by working in a market stall or not. And it means that even when it's not your turn, you are quite invested in what's happening in that particular market. So that's all of the island zones, and to use those, you need the most meeples in that zone. Then we have the warehouse. The warehouse works slightly differently. You can send your meeples to work a shift in the warehouse. Now, the shifts pay either $2 to every single meeple or $1, depending on if it's day shift or night shift. If it's an even number turn, $2. If it's an odd number turn, $1. And you can have as many meeples as you want in there. It doesn't matter about having to have the most. And the very final area on the board are these two ferries. Each ferry can only ever contain one meeple. He's the ferry driver. And if you have a meeple who's acting as a ferry driver, for every single meeple currently in the warehouse, whether they're yours or not, you get 1 gold. So you can see being a ferry driver sometimes is very valuable. Sometimes it's not worth anything at all. But you really don't want to give it up, because as soon as you've taken your meeple out, it leaves it open for someone else to put theirs in. So that is everything you can do in the meeple phase. And then the turns would start again with the set the board phase. So to recap, you have the set the board phase, you have the boat phase, and you have the meeple phase. And the core concepts within those are that the poorest player always goes first, which is really interesting because you need the most money to win the game, but also you have a huge advantage if you're poor, which leads to players making money and immediately spending it on upgrades and boats and meeples to then make themselves the poorer. So they become very asset rich but very cash poor. That's the first concept. The next concept is that you can only use an area if you have the most meeples in, which means you can't guarantee being able to sell in the market you want to or buy the boat you want to unless you invest heavily in meeples, at which point you maybe then don't have the cash to do what you want. So there's a lot of tough decisions come out of that mechanic. And finally, as soon as an item's sold, the price drops. So prices slowly climb, you keep your eye on them, you see the item you want to sell is becoming worth more and more, and then as soon as someone has sold, the price drops and your items are maybe not worth as much, or you need to consider going to a different market. Okay, that's the whole game. If there are any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact.